Hello, and welcome to Back to the Kitchen and the Days of Learning podcast. I am the co-host, David Nelson, and I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Dr. Yvonne D. Greer. Yvonne, good to see you today.
Yeah, nice seeing you, David. It's always nice to have this time to talk about health, wellness, and get back to the kitchen.
Get back to the kitchen, and I don't mind saying it's spring outside, so we're finally getting to that point where we're getting out more, and we're able to engage in some of that healthy living that we so talk about and promote on the show. And I think that goes with today's show, Yvonne, the idea of mental health, overcoming trauma, and making self-efficacy for healthy living. We always recognize the challenges that face the community that we care about, but we also know that we go with those assets, and our community champions today are just great examples of that idea of being in health with health. What were your thoughts around mental health today as we get into this space?
Well, first of all, I started thinking about the whole idea of trauma. And sometimes we don't even realize that we have trauma because it can present and manifest itself in so many ways. And some people think of trauma when they think of domestic abuse, or they think of outright traumatic experiences, such as what can be had with issues of racism, whether it's implicit or it's unconscious racism. There can be some trauma that happens that we don't even know about. But also trauma can happen with everyday life things, like if you have a car accident and you having to regroup, or having a chronic illness that you have to now manage, and not be able to do the same things that you used to do, and have to create almost like a new life path for yourself. So trauma can present itself in so many ways, and knowledge is not always empowerment. So sometimes you can say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But actually putting those things into practice is a whole nother thing. And as a nutritionist, when I first got into the field, one of the core courses that we had to take was a core on psychology. And I was like, wow, a psychology course? Nutrition, food is so personal. It becomes very, very personal. And I've always said sometimes food is more than nutrients that you give. And so people do different things when they're under trauma. That is not always the healthiest things, but it's the things that they feel will comfort them at that moment. So that's why when I started thinking about this show, I thought about comfort foods, and how do you have a healthy nutritional intake even when you're reaching for that comfort food. So that's one of the recipes that I'm showcasing today. But the idea that you have chronic conditions that sometimes we don't even think of as trauma.
Exactly. We were talking about this before the show today, when we were preparing, and we talk about this idea of mind and body connection, and we may even say mind, body, and social connection, right? The biopsychosocial, and we could even add spiritual model, because I know some of the things that we all believe in is that idea of that we can't separate those things. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that nutrition and food, they go together, with the psychology and how you feel, and frankly, as we've done throughout the shows, with the culture and the cultural implications that happen, where it goes with food, and the pride that we need to take in the food.
Yes. Many times we're not even thinking about the cultural foods, but also the foods that we go to when we're under stress. And sometimes that stress eating can be kind of very going against what you're trying to promote, but yet that for that person that's the only thing that they feel they can get down at the time. So having a bag of chips and a soda, it may not be the best thing for your body, but some people who've not eating anything, those chips and sodas can be life-saving. I usually say is that you want to try to get into a wellness mindset. You want to try to figure out how to overcome those times that you are so totally stressed, so that you get, that you recognize them and you know how to deal with them in a healthier way. But sometimes this is the subject that's not talked about. As many times, you know, shoved to the side. You know that this person might be under stress, and you hope that they get themselves together. But as far as actually dealing with the issue, many times it's kind of shoved under the rug. And so that's why you know, I'm excited today. I have to say this because Nick and Joanna, I'm one of your favorite fans. And so I'm kind of like wanting to soak it all in. But that's kind of where I was at too, is that, whether you're, a person who's in a terrible, stressful, abusive situation, or you're just a professional trying to navigate, or an entrepreneur trying to navigate through this world and regular life experiences. Um, Anything that we can do to try to center ourselves, and we all need to do that. It's not just for, people who are, going through challenges.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point because one of our guests, Nick, is a counselor, as I was, and I trained as a counselor in the 90s, early 90s. And people say we need to get over the stigma of mental health and mental illness. And it's like, we've been talking about that since the 90s. And it's like, we're still not over it yet. And I know Joanna preaches that through her mind-body connection, through her yoga work. But I do think in this space, and this is important, that we get over the stigma when we can address it in a way that is not stigmatizing, and that our guests will bring that to bring that to bear today. So the more we talk about it, the more we can practice it in such a way that everybody can feel safe and heard in that space.
And I always bring up that idea that my research was really centered on social connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if you're really at that basic level of just survival, just trying to get food, clothes, and shelter, and then you have to think of safety. The next thing that comes into play is your sense of belonging, your social connectedness. That's where that spirituality comes. That fourth stage is when you get to self-efficacy, meaning you need to really have those other things in place to be able to get grounded and to be able to then think of the wellness picture that you want. People can help you along that way. The support can be given, but now even in public health, the level of social connectedness is being evaluated and being supported, and people are figuring out ways to build that social connection if it's not there, because it's so important. Again, those two guys that I talked about, McKinnon and Dunn, the researchers that I've been quoting, the idea that you have to deal with the emotional and the social before active learning can take place. And many times we are just overlooking the fact that the emotional and the social has to be addressed.
That's what we talk about wellness, and we can often say, and everybody on the call today and on the show knows about the wellness wheel, if you will. But you know that if you don't have alignment by all the pieces, then your wheel is not going to run true. And so if you're misaligned in your trauma area, or if you're misaligned in your food space, it will impact your well-being, which I think is just a way for us to recenter ourselves. You know what? I just want to get to it. And so Yvonne, tell us about our theme today. What is the theme of this show?
Well, our theme today is healthy makeovers, simple comfort food that packs a nutritional punch. And the question of the day, can you name one healthy makeover of a comfort food that you plan to make? And I was sitting here thinking of my go-to, my trail mix.
Trail mix.
I keep my trail mix at hand. I get backed up, can't eat, and this is my comfort food. But it's got the walnuts and the raisins and craisins and almonds in there and sunflower seeds, a mix of everything, and it is very tasty. And when I start getting really like, oh, I'm just working too hard, I pull my trail mix out, knowing that I love it. It's tasty because I threw a couple of little dark chocolate drops in there to make it extra special. But I'm eating a healthy, nutritious snack, comforting, feeding my body with protein, nutrition, but yet I'm also making sure that I'm nourishing my body while I'm actually still working. And so, sometimes we have to make sure that we have those comfort foods, have that, that go-to source of something you can snack on. But now I'm snacking on healthier foods. The recipe that I have is a healthy makeover of a parfait that is nutritious, and I say delicious.
That's so wonderful, and I knew the show, and so I can tell you mine. And for everybody who's on the chat that might want to throw their comfort food in there, Karen picked up some really delicious strawberries, and so strawberries is one of my comfort foods. I gotta admit, sometimes strawberry and ice cream is really my comfort food.
Well,
But at lunch today, it was going to be strawberries, so I have got my strawberries for after the show. So who else has got something that they want to throw in the chat that we can make comment on? And with that, we're going to, I love this, and Nick's chiming in as well. So at that, Kelsey's going to cue up the video. We'll watch the video, we'll come back, discuss it, and then we'll bring our champions in. All right, go ahead, Kels.
Hello, and welcome back to the kitchen, season 3. I'm Dr. Yvonne Greer, registered dietitian and owner of Why Eat Right, nutritional consultant and healthy living coach. This program is being brought to you by MCOP, the Milwaukee County Organization Promoting Prevention in the Medical College of Wisconsin, in partnership with the State of Wisconsin Chronic Disease Program through funding from the CDC 1815 grant. For this session, I will be demonstrating a comfort food that is both delicious and loaded with nutrition. High in protein, calcium, magnesium, potassium, your omega-3, phytochemicals, and fiber. Eating a high-protein snack can help you to control urges for eating those high-calorie snacks that feed your taste buds but do nothing for your body. So let's get started. Our recipe for today is my luscious cheese and fresh fruit parfait, which contains 1% cottage cheese, an assortment of fruits, starting with our banana, your lemon, blueberries, strawberries, kiwi, some vanilla, a small amount of pure cane sugar, crushed walnuts, and topped with crushed graham crackers. Your fruits have been washed, so we will be starting with our bananas. For the bananas, we typically need 2 medium or 1 large to make about a half of a cup of banana. So peel the banana and cut it up into coins. You don't want to cut them too big. Yeah, seeing that this is a nice big banana, we would not have to use that second banana for our dish. There's plenty of banana. For the lemon, you just want to get the juice of half of a lemon. And again, you just try to get some of those seeds out before you squeeze it so you don't get seeds all in your banana. Get as much juice in the banana and all covered as possible. This is a very juicy lemon. So this lemon juice will protect the bananas and keep them a nice white color. And that's what an antioxidant property is, from your lemon to your banana. It protects it from the air. Next, we will be cutting up our kiwi fruit. You first start by getting that core piece out and one end, and you cut the other end off, and then you just peel it around. For its size, kiwi is one of the highest fruits with vitamin C and also loaded with potassium. For a ripe kiwi, you want it to be just able to push down with your thumb. So then we're just going to cut it in half, and then cut it in half again, and then we're just going to cut each one into smaller cubes. I cut up the first one earlier, so I'm going to add this too. Next, I'll go and cut up our strawberries. Once you have the tops cut off, then you want to cut it in two, and then again, same thing here, you cut it across. These are nice and big, and then you would take them and then cut them across again to make the bite-sized pieces again. And there you have it. Our fruits are now all cut up. Now we'll make the cheese filling by blenderizing up the container of cottage cheese. It's a 16-ounce container. This is 1% low-fat cottage cheese. 4% cottage cheese is high in fat. This is very low in fat. Before we start the blender, we're going to add our sugar. We need to have 2/3 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And this is all you would need in your filling. At the top. And then blenderize on high. Just going to stir it to make sure everything gets down, and continue blenderizing. It only takes about a minute or two. Let's see how it is. One more time, and our cheese filling is finished. Look how velvety smooth it is. We have one more step to do before we start assembling our parfait. To prepare our graham crackers, all you would need is a wooden spoon, a closing bag, and 4 of these full sheets. Let's put it in the bag, and all you're going to do is make crumbs. It goes really quick, it's very easy. Do it on one side, and you just turn it over, and you do it on the other side. And there's your crumbs. For each portion, you're going to add a dollop to it. It's going to be about 2 ounces in each one. Want to make sure that you have it even distributed, and you can use about half of your sauce. I usually just tap it a little to even it out. Now you're going to start with your fruits. Makes no difference what order, but you're going to be putting at least a tablespoon in each. You want to cover it, the bottom, so you're going to have other fruits to put in there, so don't have to overdo it at that point. We talked about phytochemicals. Your fruits are giving you phytochemicals, flavonoids, lycopene from those colors that it has. I usually like to put in my kiwi next. We do 2 rounds of this, so you want to save some to put in the next round. And I get my banana. There's 2 or 3 of them in there at least. It's going to be plenty. That may stick together. In here. Then our blueberries. These have already been washed and drained. It's always, I get to this stage, I always start smiling because I know what's to come. Now we put some walnuts in here. Walnuts has the omega-3 in them. Very healthy for you. Say we should be eating at least an ounce of walnuts or nuts a day. And as people know, omega-3 is good for your heart. Okay, got our first layer in. Now we go with our second layer. Going to go a little faster because we know what's going to happen. With our strawberries. And our kiwi. Everybody knows I make my little fruit salad with the last of leftovers. So if there's any leftovers, here's the banana. I always start with 2 so that I know they all get some. Separate that with one coming. And then your blueberry. Yeah, these are getting kind of full here. Just gonna put a little bit on each one. Usually what I do at this point is I just do like this here. Make sure that they're kind of shake down a little bit. Yeah. One more little bit of your nuts. And my last thing is our topping. That's why I do this on a tray, because I know some is going to fall off, but that's okay. On the tray. Refrigerate for 2 hours or eat it right away. So there you have it, a nutritious and delicious dish, perfect for when you want that tasty treat.
let's get on to our invited guests.
There you go. Fantastic, Yvonne. What a wonderful show, nutritious and delicious. And I love that you can make these things not only as a one and done, but you can have these over several days and keep them in the refrigerator with I love the tip around the lemon over the banana to keep it from getting brown. And brown doesn't mean it's bad to eat. It just turns brown with the air.
Yes, yes. And if I tell you, Richard and me have been enjoying these recipes because we divide them up and we have our snacks. They do not last. I mean, they last a good while, so you can make up several of them, but they don't last that long when they're that good.
And Richard is our film extraordinaire and Yvonne's brother, and so we're grateful for his expertise and willingness to support this work. And I love that you had you've got all of these colors, and you've got the yogurt, or excuse me, the cottage cheese, which is much like yogurt. Then when you start to blend it, and then you have some crunch to it, so it's like you get all of the taste in there, which we want to be able to taste our food and have all those experiences.
Yeah, and the walnuts in there is very good, you know, getting the magnesium and that type of thing in. So those walnuts are very healthy. And we should be eating way more nuts than what we are eating nowadays. So that's another way to get those nuts in on a regular basis. But a comfort food, it is definitely a comfort treat. And I will say that I've made it with all types of sweetener sources. I've made it with maple syrup. I've made it with that monk sweetener. I've made it with different things, and it still comes out to be very, very good. So you know, if you don't want to eat sugar, you can, you know, substitute that vanilla. It does set it off, and that makes it where, and it really is a very tasty treat. Sometimes even if I don't make a parfait, I'll just make the sauce up and have that with my fruit. And
I,
it's very, very tasty. So
I
some people,
love it, and
they
it's
don't like
all,
cottage cheese, but I said, I know a way to get you to like cottage cheese.
and it's all natural, and it's all good for you, and you listed all the benefits of this, and you can still be comforted on that. Yvonne, what a fantastic recipe today. I am always, when we do this filming, my mouth is always watering after you create one of your recipes. So thank you.
Thank you. We're now online up to 12 recipes that have been demonstrated. So telling everyone to go back online and look at those old shows, and you'll get some
go
great
back to the
recipes.
kitchen, get back to the kitchen and try something.
Yes.
So, we're so excited to have our two guests today, and we're going to take a moment to introduce them. They've been on the show with us thus far. And I have the distinct pleasure of meeting Nick Dillion for the first time today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. And Kelsey will put in Mr. Dillion's press kit into the show notes, and people can contact Nick on their own. But let me give you a few words that have been used to describe Nick: inspirational, innovative, empowering. Thousands of individuals from the community to corporate America have learned from Dillion's insight on leadership and professional development, entrepreneurship, and personal empowerment. The Milwaukee native possesses a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and a Master in Adult Education as an alumnus of Marquette University and University of Phoenix, respectively. Nicholas also completed an additional Master's of Science degree in counseling from the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and has completed a postgraduate doctoral certificate in industrial organizational behavior psychology. Nick has appeared on national television and has had initial media exposure in the Journal Sentinel, the Business Journal, and the Huffington Post. As a #1 best-selling author and part of the John Maxwell leadership team, he is well sought out expert in self-empowerment space and even wears the title of radio show personality. Welcome, Nick Dillion.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I tell you, like I said, I'm a fan, so I'll be smiling this whole entire time just to have have Nick here for just a minute. Yes, he travels so much. But Joanna, I have to now introduce Joanna Brooks, and she is fantastic. Joanna is the founder of Embody Yoga, a yoga studio on a mission to share the practice of yoga with Black people and people of color. She recently founded Embody Yoga for All, a nonprofit working to bring equity to the field of yoga, and Embody, a wellness center catering to the wellness needs of Black women and of all women. She is a registered yoga teacher and a certified classic Pilates instructor. Joanna has a deep commitment to holistic wellness in communities of color and finds joy in witnessing Black people and others move towards wellness through the practice of yoga, Pilates, and other healing modalities. And I'm just so excited because she's done some wonderful things with youth, children, and families related to stress relieving. And I'm just so excited to hear about all that you're doing at Embody Yoga. And you have to tell us about your new space, because she's got, you have to tell us how that came about. She has a whole new space for Embody Yoga.
Thank you all for having me. I will be sure to share that story with you all at the appropriate time, if not.
Wonderful.
I'd like to start off with, we talked about talking about this, about the idea of trauma and stress, and we were all engaged with this. And I feel more relaxed just having Joanna in the room. I think we all feel that vibe from her and from Nick. But can you talk about, from your perspectives, how this topic of mental health and mental well-being, why it's so important? Can I start with you, Nick?
Sure. Well, I will say, while mental health and the topic of mental health has been not new to any of us, I think it became even more prevalent in the past couple of years, because the world had to pause and we all had to, our lives were disrupted. And so for me, probably in the last 3 years, mental health has been so intentional in terms of people wanting to get help and seeking out help. So it's very real, it's very prevalent, it's very, ongoing as we deal with it in this day in society. But one of the unique things that happened is, as the world paused, we had to find a way to continue with commerce and continue with business. And what I also know is that for a lot of us, being at work, interacting with each other, engaging each other was our social. And some of us were banned to our homes. And we found out in that moment that we didn't like ourselves. Mm-hmm. We found out in that moment that we didn't like our spouses, we didn't like our children. It was just a lot going on, but we had to manage that the day to day and still get the job done and still take care of ourselves and our family. And so to be able to do that has created a lot of, I will tell you, in the last couple of years, they have indicated that the prescriptions for psychotropic medication has increased upwards of 25 to 30%. It's just real, but I commend a lot of folks in the workforce who are actually being very intentional. Now more than ever, I've seen more people raise the flag of wanting to make sure their mental and emotional wellness is good in the workplace, far more than I have seen it in my 30 plus years in the workplace. So it's good.
Thanks, Nick. That's a really wonderful way to open it. Joanna, from your perspective, how is this topic of mental health so important and so relevant to your work?
Sure, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest questions that we ask ourselves in life, aside from what is my purpose, is how can I be happy here, right, with this life? And I think when we talk about purpose and happiness, and oftentimes those two things are connected, we can't live in our purpose and we can't truly be happy if we're not at peace and if we're not well. And I think, as Nick has already pointed out, right, because of the pandemic and so many things that have happened in the past few years, I think people have placed a premium on these things, living a purposeful life and living a happy life. And so I think that has led a lot of people to begin to ask the questions and do the work around their mental health and wellness so that they can live a life of purpose and a life of joy and happiness, which I believe we all deserve.
I totally agree with that. And with that, I'm in looking at what are some of those how-to things. Could you just tell us, and Nicholas, I also want you to kind of think about this too. Tell us more about, first of all, Joanna, the power that is unleashed in the body when you are doing your yoga, when you're getting centered, and that power that is released that can help you overcome the stress and adversity through that mental centering. And then Nick, just the idea that, how do you help people get back control of their life? How, what kind of tips are you using? So Joanna, could you kind of tell us about the yoga and then the tips?
Sure, absolutely. And, I think the best way for me to answer this question is to share personal experience in my personal yoga practice. And so there was a time before I started Embody Yoga where I was going through some deep personal issues, right? We all, experience those things in life, but it was just one of those moments in my life for me. And I found my yoga practice to be what kind of kept me and sustained me during that time. And now, to speak more specifically about what was happening for me within the practice, you walk into a yoga studio, you walk into a class, and you may have lots of things on your mind or on your heart. And I believe that it is beneficial to, one, process what's on your mind and heart, to acknowledge those things, but then also to periodically have a break, a breather from those things also, right? Just to offer you a moment of relief. And so I found that yoga did both of those things for me, all within 1 hour long practice. And so what I mean, or what that looked like, is, for me, I would walk through the door with this heaviness in my heart, and I would get on my yoga mat. And as I'm moving through practice, I am no longer in my head, so to speak. I'm really in my body. I'm listening to the cues. I'm breathing deeply, and I'm creating some space between myself and whatever is bothering me, some much needed space, right? Now, at the same time, I am also, in some way, maybe even unconsciously, still processing, what's on my mind or heart. And so what happens is, at the end of practice, by the time you roll up your mat and walk out of the yoga studio, you feel much different from how you arrived. You feel different physically, right? Your nervous system has calmed down because of the deep breathing and the focus and the mindfulness, right? But you experience a little bit more emotional relief and peace and joy. And all of those things come through the yoga practice because you have an opportunity, again, to create space from that thing, but then also somehow process it and walk away potentially with more clarity, answers, and peace. Does that answer your question, Dr.
That
Greer?
answers the question. And I remember at our last conference when we were dealing with some deep issues, we made sure that we had a time to take that break and put the breath work in, and to just center ourselves back so we can go to that next stage. And it is so powerful. But Nick, could you tell us about, the work that you do with individuals so that they can take back control of their lives? And I know that the way I put it is, so they can believe that they can overcome the challenges of the day-to-day life.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to piggyback on Joanna's answer, because I think the two are hand in hand, because we suggest that level of care outside of counseling, outside of coaching experience as well, is that you have to give yourself and have a daily regimen. And it reminds me of, I suffer from a lung disease. And so for me, I'm really big on wholeness and wellness. And so my day starts in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning on the treadmill. And while I'm on that treadmill, I'm putting in here, I call it my mental space. I'm putting in here, whether it's a positive word, whether it's some inspirational music, but I'm utilizing that time to go and release what might very well be tugging, what I may have in terms of emotional turmoil or situations or problems that I might have, because I'm just one that believes that I believe in the power of energy, and I believe in the power of mindset. And so for me, each and every day, and I'm constantly encouraging clients to do this, is that you have to give yourself a regimen that allows you the moment for mindfulness, that allows you the moment for release, for pouring into you. Because the unique thing about this work is that if we don't put anything in here, then the mind just reprocesses what has always worked. And if what has always worked is the comforting food of Oreo cookies, because that makes me feel good, and if what always worked is, doing other things that don't really foster wholeness and wellness, then I default to that. Okay. And so just getting people in the mindset of, hey, take some time throughout the day. I do it in the morning. And another thing I do sometimes in between sessions that are high energy and high emotion, I'll do some mindfulness exercises. I take those 5 minutes and just close my eyes and just, kind of release. I love the Calm app, which I utilize a lot. And, just play that and just take some time. If I'm in a moment or situation, I always do the example of just putting your hands together and just slowly rubbing them together until you feel the grooves in your hands. And if if you can't do that, then just take some time and sit here and count your toes while they're in your shoes. Little things like that makes you focus, removes your mind from any external distractions so that you can continue to process effectively throughout the day. Another thing I want to co-sign on, Joanna, is never, ever, ever discount the power of happiness. Happiness is real. It should be. We should embrace it. Don't lowball it. It is good and acceptable for us to be happy throughout our day. But it's the power of us choosing to be happy. The power still lies in us.
Yeah, I want to comment here, because I think that so much of culture says that we've got to have it and we've got to have it now, and that if you don't have it now, that you're not going to be happy. And each of you gave a word or a phrase, and Yvonne said the wellness mindset early on. Nick, you talked about intentional and intentionality. And Joanna, you talked about practice. And I love these examples because it really comes from, you got nutrition, you got counseling and leadership, and you've got the idea of yoga. And these are different disciplines that are really speaking into the same thing. And I would add in my space, the area of education, which is really where I find my spot in that space. And each of those needs to have a mindset, an intentionality, and a practice, because Yvonne, you've always said, nutrition is not an end game or an end goal, but it's a lifetime practice, right?
Right. It's a way of life. It's a culture of life, a culture of health and wellness. And the idea, because sometimes when people are going through my programs, the first thing they'll say is, well, how many cheat days can I have? And I say, there is no cheat days. You live your whole life. You don't have a cheat day. I said, you have choices. Sometimes you may choose to have something that you know might not be the healthiest, but that's a choice you're making. But just like you made that choice, you can go back and say, okay, I haven't been eating enough vegetables. I need to make a choice to go and buy me some vegetables, some fruits, get back into doing what I know is healthy for my body. And so there's choices that you make. And a lot of people seem to think that, nutrition is not a lifestyle, but something you do as a fad. No, you're deciding to have a healthy nutritional intake on a regular basis. That's your base diet, but you live in a world that has so many different choices in there. Again, you have the choice. You shouldn't beat yourself up. That's a lot of times what happens is that outside forces not always is the one putting the guilt trip. Sometimes we put the guilt trip on ourselves through expectations or trying to live up to something that we are not. I had to say to a group, because we have a new nurturing collaborative that we're doing, that you are worthy from your birthright. When those babies are born, they don't know anything. They're just little innocent people. You were that innocent person. Your birthright says you should have everything that you can dream of. And if you believe that, then you know that you're unique in yourself and you can feel good about the person you are. And sometimes I find people are trying to, cover up the feelings of guilt or expectations that others have put on you or the world. Like, I have to have a mate. If I don't, something's wrong with me. I just bring that up because I'm single. But but that is sometimes, we tend to beat ourselves up. And believe me, that affects your health, your nutrition, the way you walk in life, what practices you make. And so that's why this type of a talk is so important, because you don't get to wellness without dealing with yourself,
That's
your
exactly
mental
right.
health.
I want to get into a question that I think that our champions will be able to address. And I'd like to talk about some success, some wins, if you will. And I love that idea of what Yvonne is saying there, Dr. Greer is saying there around choosing, if you will. And you made that, you alluded to that as well, Joanna. What happens when someone chooses happiness through yoga? What are some transformation? What are the things that you see has happened for people, especially as it relates to mental well-being or other chronic diseases that you've come across?
Sure. So a lot of what I'll share comes from my clients directly, right? They're with us in our yoga studio, maybe for an hour, a couple of times a week, right? So we may not know their whole stories and their lives until they come back and they share with us. And oftentimes the greatest testimonies come from those students who've been gone from their practice for a while and then realize that something was different, that they didn't feel the same, that they lost some happiness or some peace, and that led them right back to their mat and right back into the yoga studio. And so they tell us things like they are just generally in a better mood, which I think speaks to like happiness and peace and a greater ability to deal with stress. They often report if they have partners that their partners are encouraging them to get back to yoga for those reasons, so that they'll be in a better mood, a better disposition at home. They have shared with us their success around weight loss, if that was a goal for them. They've shared that they sleep better at night. We hear that so often. So many people struggle with different, even if they don't meet criteria to be diagnosed with a sleeping disorder or insomnia or something like that, right? They struggle with calming down enough to have a good night's rest. And so a lot of them share that their sleep has improved. And then we know from the literature, from the research that's being done around yoga, that it can also help decrease symptoms of a variety of mental health disorders, and a lot of like medical conditions also, to include hypertension, high blood pressure, blood sugar levels, and things like that. So between our students and the science, that's what we know to be true. And again, from my personal experience, yoga has just carried me through some of the darker moments, helped me take things with a grain of salt. Things don't bother me as much as they used to. things don't stress me out as much as they used to. And in general, I think I found more joy and more happiness through my practice.
Yeah, there's this, I would say, and I've just gotten into a little bit of yoga, but there's also a connection to the spiritual aspects of that as well. The idea that you are this spiritual being that's being expressed through the yoga, which I think is wonderful. Nick, as a practicing counselor, you must be hearing all these things that Joanna is saying, as I've heard them, and going, "Yep, when you do counseling, you get these benefits," right? Can you double down on what she's saying as it relates to your practice?
Yes, and I will even echo what Dr. Greer said earlier, is you have that increased self-efficacy. And all of that comes through truly, I think, as we get in one with ourselves and we do the work. And the big part of this is beyond the behavioral exercise, is doing the mental and emotional work on a daily basis that allows us to not only become more aware of ourselves, more accepting of ourselves, more comfortable with ourselves as we increase our overall emotional intelligence. And then we increase our confidence, we increase our self-image, we increase our self-esteem, all of those things increase. And we get to that higher level of self-efficacy because we believe that we can function better in the world, in society. And as life happens, we feel more comfortable in the space of being able to manage the day-to-day and be successful at it. When we don't do the work, you're always going to hear people say, and I'm sure Joanna's probably heard this, is I just find myself stuck. I just find myself at this space where I have all these things that are not going in the right space, and I just don't know what to do. And because we're always usually looking for the answer outside of ourselves, and it really is within us.
That is powerful. So much of this is about doing the work, and I as a consumer of mental health counseling myself, the idea that you have to be willing and able and wanting to look into that space in order to be more comfortable and confident. And I think each of you would probably agree with me to say, and you don't have to go it alone, right? You can have a confidant or someone that, like each of you in your respective discipline, to say, I feel stuck. Will you try to help me or support me in some way? Yvonne, what's coming up for you when you hear what these wonderful champions are saying about their disciplines?
Well, it's just reinforcing some of the things that I've always put into my practice, but also some of the things that I have done personally to get where I am today. See, people see me doing all this work, being in the community, keep going and doing these things, but I had to do the work on myself. And I also had to do that self-assessment, the self-analysis, to say, what is it that I really need to focus on? Where are my strengths? What are my shortcomings? People know if they hear me do a nutrition program, they're going to hear my confessions of the stuff that I really know that I'm going to like no matter what, that I know is not as healthy. I'll admit it. I like fried chicken. I love fried chicken. But I told people when I analyzed myself, I said, but I like chicken, period. So I learned how to make many different chicken dishes. So I don't have fried chicken or cooked fried chicken at home, because if I see it, I'm going to eat it. But I will make me a curry chicken. I'll make a stir-fried chicken. I'll make a steamed chicken. Now, I'll do all kind of different things with chicken because I like chicken. But I don't have to have it the way that I know is not the healthiest. And so that's self-analyzing. One word that helped me to kind of move forward in looking at my own personal career and where I wanted to go is proactive. That be proactive thing, I think Stephen Covey is the one that had a whole chapter on proactive. And I was like, okay, what do I need to do to be proactive about my own life, to get things going my way? That's what I said. You're going to have to be more proactive. But it does mean that you're taking the work to do that analysis, to really see where you are heading, to understand your own self and your, your own practices. I mean, I even made a list of things that I needed to do. And I was reading this book by, I think it's Dyer. I can't think of his first name, but I was reading a book about the erroneous zones, and that you needed to get over some of these different roadblocks that's stopping you. And it was saying, if you want to exercise while you're reading this book, put the book down, get up and do some jumping jacks. I started laughing in my room because I said, oh my God, the book is telling me to put the book down. I actually got up and did some exercises because he said, if you want to get started, do it. And I thought, oh, wow. I said, sometimes it's in our own head. It's stopping us from doing the things that we need to do and trying to overcome those. That's where the mental health, that's where the getting over traumas, or even understanding that you have a trauma. I had to understand that I call myself having PTSD of racism. And it was because of some of the life things that has happened over time. So it is not going to stop me from going forward, but sometimes it makes me know that I'm being triggered. I might be overreacting, or I'm going outside of my peace. And how can I get back to my peace? Because I'm letting this trigger me. And sometimes it's speaking up. And so people will hear me say, I got a little PTSD, but I'm going to speak up and let you know what's triggering me. And it has been so empowering to know that it's okay to be in that vulnerable stage and let people know where you're at. That's when I start thinking about some of the things that you're doing, the idea of being able to identify that vulnerable piece of yourself, and then how do you go forward? So
in counseling,
you're thinking there.
In counseling, we always say we'd be comfortable with silence, and I think we were all reflective upon that deep comment that you had there. Nick, go ahead, take it from give your I know I saw your reaction in your face, but please speak truth to what Yvonne is saying there.
I would just echo that, is that we got to take action. And we got to be willing to take not only action, but consistent action. And I think I've heard this throughout today, is you're always going to be the loudest person speaking to you. There's a lot of external things that will happen, but you are going to speak to you the loudest. And we've got to be just willing to know that it's a holistic approach to this, is that because even from a counseling standpoint, we can always do the behavioral exercise, and I'll echo that. We can do the behavioral exercise, but if we're not shifting our mindset and our energy along with the action of the behavior, then you're really just taking yourself back to square one again. We got to be always constantly building this mental and emotional muscle. You all talked about that, just making sure that social and emotional, things are managed and taken care of so that you can get in a space of self-efficacy. If I'm challenging nutritionally, if I'm challenging mentally, emotionally, even physically for that standpoint, it is extremely demotivating. And so as I'm talking to clients, I'm constantly saying, hey, how are we nutritionally? How are we mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally? Those things need to be in alignment so that you feel well about what you have to do. Because otherwise, when the triggers come, if we're not doing the work, we go back to what we know. Yeah. And the whole process is we got to create the space and the plan that allows us to really, truly, see our level of resiliency when life happens.
That's so beautiful. Joanna, that idea of action in this space, what would you say to someone who says, oh, I don't know, I don't have the body type, and I'm too old, and I'm too tired, and I don't know how to begin. What would you say to a person in that space?
I'm glad you asked me that, and I don't know if I will directly answer your question, but there were things that I wanted to say, as a result of the conversation that we're having right now about, I guess, taking the initiative and wanting your life to change. And so when I think about that, I think that there needs to be a certain level a person reaches in terms of being uncomfortable that motivates them to do something different. And I know Nick can speak to this, and David, you probably can also, but for a lot of disorders, before they can be diagnosed, one of the commonalities for many disorders is that it has to reach a point where it's disturbing, like your daily life. It disturbs you, right? So I think that that's a condition for change to happen. You have to be uncomfortable or in some way disturbed, right? And that you have to be so uncomfortable that it motivates you to seek out the change or the help that you need to turn things around. And so what I find with yoga is that a lot of times, yeah, people may be coming in because they feel like they need to be more physically active, but oftentimes they're there for a deeper reason, whether they want to admit that or not, right? They are stressed. They are in some type of transition, maybe a change in a romantic partnership or processing a loss. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get from people who say, my doctor said I need to do yoga. And then the longer we talk, the truth comes out. They are sad. They are potentially depressed or anxious and just trying to find a way to arrive at peace. And so in a roundabout way, in trying to answer your question, what I would ask people or say to people, are you uncomfortable enough to make the change? Are you uncomfortable enough to make the change?
You know, as you said that, now I'm doing, you know, I have a course that I'm doing right now, and we just talked about stages of change, that theoretical model. And so that, you know, I don't want to get too deep into that, but I remember when a doctor would refer clients to me and they would say, the client would call me up, they give my telephone number, just call Yvonne Greer at the health department, because they knew I was there, they can get free services. And they would say, my doctor told me to call you. And I said, well, what do you need? I don't know. He just told me to call you. And it was like they had no, even though he probably, I would say he probably said you need to do this or need to do that, they hadn't internalized what they actually need to do. And when you said you got to be, you know, uncomfortable, you have to be at a stage where you're ready to make some change. That person calling me up, even if I had gave them nutrition information, they may not have did anything because they wasn't at a stage that they felt that they needed to make a change. And I think that was so important to realize that you really don't take that action until you are the one ready to take that action. That you have to internalize that. So that's that free contemplation before you ever know if you're trying to impact them. They may not do anything. It may not go anywhere.
Dr. Greer, can I just jump in really quickly?
Sure.
I want to share, and some people may have like caught on to this, but I actually also have a background in counseling. I have a master's in community counseling, also from Marquette University. So I was so excited when I heard Nick mention that he's a graduate too. And so one of the things though that discouraged me from going into counseling long-term is the fact that as a clinician in training, I thought it was my responsibility to make people change, right? I understood the stages of change, you know, at least theoretically, but I didn't understand it in practice. And so often I was working with clients who just were not uncomfortable enough or ready, you know, to make that change. And so again, just to, you know, add to the conversation that we're already having, you know, readiness for change, the stage of change that somebody is in. I think it's important for us, you know, as service providers to identify that, but also for people to take the time to engage in self-reflection to answer that question for themselves. Am I ready?
Yeah. It just opened up my eyes that I can be getting people at different stages of readiness, and I can help them in certain ways. But that one lady I told, go back to your doctor and figure out what you need, because I can't help you until you know what you need. And that was a different for me, because at one time I would have said, okay, we'll go and we'll sit down and we'll do this. And the idea that this person obviously had some issues that if the doctor referred them, there were some definite issues that they weren't even internalizing. And I think that's part of it. I want to say to Nick, when I listen, now Nick is on social media, and he gives these little blurts. I call them little blurts, but they're these helpful tips, but he doesn't give you too much. He gives you just enough for you to think about it. And you could take that tidbit, and it is so inspiring. So could you just talk about that piece? Because sometimes, I am so motivated by those little tips that you're giving.
So the big thing about those is that it's work. And so your whole objective is to allow people to challenge their thinking, to challenge their mindset, to disrupt old patterns, and to really take action. So you can, because again, I go back to, it's easy to do the behavioral exercise, but if you're not willing to do the ultimate work, then you're back to square one again. And even as we have the dialogue today, my mindset goes back to, I don't want it to get to a space where things become unmanageable. We speak to the clients, especially around mental and emotional health. I don't want us to get to the space where now, mentally and emotionally, it's unmanageable. I don't want us to get to the space where now we're going to the doctor and we've got some serious health and clinical problems. I want us to have a mindset and a lifestyle that promotes wellness, that promotes wholeness, that promotes, mental and emotional wellness, that really allows us to deal with the day-to-day. So then when life stops happening, which is what we can't control, we still have the ability to control ourselves through it. And so, yes, you're pushing for the clients to do the work. And I appreciate your word regarding counseling, Joanna, because that's why I shifted my counseling emphasis to more heavy on the addiction side, because the client has to do the work. And while, yes, we still end up diagnosing and there's dual diagnosis and stuff like that, but the client must do the work. So anyone that's even tuning in today, I can't overly emphasize the need for us to not only take action in movement and doing some things and having a regimen to take care of things, but continue to build this muscle. That mental and emotional muscle is going to be the driver of what you do every single day of your life.
Joanna, would you give us a practice that you use for yourself, as Yvonne has just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that, and I don't even know if I think of it as like a practice so much anymore, because it's just a part of my life at this point. I always take time, whether at the beginning of my day or at the end of the day, to do some deep breathing, to just sit, right? I try to tune everything around me out. If I can, like, eliminate stimuli, turning off the TV and things like that, I will, and just close my eyes and just breathe for a moment. And you'd be surprised by how, like, just that simple act, and you don't need to sit there for 10 minutes or anything like that, or maybe not even a specified amount of time, right? I think you just need to start and to ground yourself in the breath for a little bit before you proceed.
That's fantastic. Yvonne, I am remiss if I don't say that our time has come to an end with our guest today. And it's like, where did the time
Now
go?
I'm like Andre was last time.
Yeah.
What? Already?
I want to end with a note for everybody to say, if you're listening, or if you listen to the rebroadcast of this, if you don't have someone in your life, there is help that's available for you. You should never be desperate enough that you feel like you're alone, though many times you feel like you're alone. If you are feeling so desperate that you feel like you might hurt yourself or someone else, there is a national helpline for everybody to call, and Kelsey's going to put that into the chat feature. And I think if you have someone in your life, I think I do this pretty regularly. I sit down with people over coffee and say, "How are you?" And then I say, "How are you really?" And if you love them and they love you, they'll be able to express some of the challenges that they might be feeling. Yvonne, I'm going to turn it to you to give us a wrap up, and let's take it away.
Oh my God, I have written so many things down, and I'm going to try to do my best and not get too long-winded, but I will start off talking and saying that yoga can promote better mood, better relationship, better sleep, reduce symptoms of mental health disorders, even lower blood pressure, can give you the ability to take things with a grain of salt, but you have to do the work. You're always going to need to do the work to build your mental and emotional muscle. You need to have all the sectors of wellness in alignment, from the mental, emotional, spiritual, nutritional, and the physical. You need to be able to be ready to deal with life challenges, but you need to have done that work in advance. You need to make sure you take action. Many times people take action when they reach the point of being disturbed or uncomfortable. They need to be ready to have that change happen. You need to disrupt old patterns. You know, you have to do the work to change that mental mindset. You can't control life, but you can control how you react and how you can deal with life if you do the work in advance. Always take time to do some deep breathing. Ground yourself in your breath. And I want to say that you can even change your nutritional habits, but you need to do the work to find out what works for you. And with that, I want to say, wow, this has just been a little snapshot, but I know that both of you are actively doing the work. Like I said, even though I keep saying, I'm going to come to your class and I'm going to do this, I'm like one of those ones that's taking in everything that you give out. The thing that you didn't say is that, Joanna, you have classes for youth. Haven't you started classes for youth and adults? Could you kind of say something about that so people know that those are available?
Yep, absolutely. So our biggest thing is making sure that anybody who wants to practice yoga has access to do that through our studio. And so with our nonprofit Embody Yoga for All, we offer kids yoga classes. Right now, we're offering those classes for 2 separate age groups. I think we started at like 6 years old up to 8, and then 9 to 12. And those classes have typically been free, or there's a deposit and they receive the deposit back. But of course, we also offer scholarships because we don't want there to be a child out there who can't participate because of the financial circumstances that they were born into. So we offer those kids yoga classes right now once a month, and we plan to increase those very soon. Also through our nonprofit, we offer class scholarships. So if you want to come and practice yoga with us, but your finances are so that you can't really account for that cost, then we'll give you 5 free class passes so that you can take class once a week, twice a week if you like to, and there are opportunities to reapply and continue to receive that scholarship. And yeah, we offer multiple classes a week, primarily for adults, different styles of yoga, hot yoga, some unheated yoga classes. And as you mentioned in my intro, I recently became a Pilates instructor. So we offer Pilates classes also.
And Joanna, where's the studio located?
We are now in Glendale. So we are at 4650 North Port Washington Road in the Barnabas business complex right at about Port Washington Road in Hampton.
That is fantastic. And Nick, let's have a commercial for you. Where can people find you these days?
You can find me really all over. If you find me on social media and inbox me with technology, I'm back and forth in Dallas, Texas, as well as Wisconsin. So I manage a clinic in Wisconsin, and I have one here in Dallas. And I do a lot of speaking, training, and networking, but I do a lot of remote work as well. And I do a monthly accountability coaching program that I do on a monthly basis, just to help people stay focused on their goals and to continue staying in motion. And so I got a lot of stuff going on. Just check out my social media if you want to, come to one of the events or learn more. Books, you can purchase them right through my website. So just got a lot going on to be able to help those out here who need help.
Well, Yvonne, I never thought that our shows could get any better than the last show, but I'll tell you what, ma'am, this show is better than ever. And this is just wonderful. Okay, so our next session is going to be May 17th at 2023, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Back to the Kitchen. The last show of the season. Don't miss it. Re-energize your personal health, working life into your prevention plan.
Yes.
On behalf of Yvonne Greer, I am David Nelson, and thank you, Nick Dillion and Joanna Brooks.
You definitely made my day lift up to everything that I wanted in this program. And I am just, I feel so blessed to know both of you and to see the great work that you are continuing to do. So, like I said, I'll be watching from afar, but I am just so pleased that you were able to make it to our show. That's why I say we have rock stars that's been coming on our shows, and you two are definitely rock stars in my book.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Greer. The feeling is mutual for sure. And thank you
you.
also, David.
You're welcome. Be well, everybody.
Bye
Yeah.
now. Take care.
Thank you.